Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive that we've put together specifically for Mr. Martin's IB biology class.
That's right.
We are going to be talking about how organisms adapt to their environments.
Absolutely.
It's really fascinating how different life forms have kind of found their own unique ways to survive and thrive.
Yeah, it's like solving a puzzle almost, where each living thing has found its own little unique solution
Right.
to the challenges that the world throws at it.
Yeah, exactly. And so today we're going to kind of try to break down some of those solutions
Exactly.
and look at what are some of the common themes that we see in adaptations.
Yeah, and I think to really get started with this, we need to understand this idea of a habitat, right? So a habitat is more than just a location. It's the whole package of abiotic factors that
Right.
support an organism's life, and abiotic just meaning non-living. So we're talking about things like temperature, rainfall, sunlight, soil type. All of those things together make up a habitat.
So it's like a customized home for each species.
Exactly. It is totally customized. And you think about it,
Yeah.
if you take a prickly pear cactus, for example, that's perfectly happy.
Right.
In the Sonoran Desert, all that dry, sandy landscape,
Yeah.
intense sunlight, you put a moisture-loving fern in there and it wouldn't last a day.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Different organisms, different needs,
Totally.
different habitats.
Different habitats for sure. And that's where these adaptations come in.
Okay.
So adaptations are these special features or behaviors that organisms develop over many generations to survive in those specific habitats.
So it's like evolution has given each species its own set of tools to thrive in their own unique spot.
Absolutely. And those tools can be super diverse. We can talk about
Okay.
physical traits like a cactus having spines,
Mhm.
or we can talk about behaviors like a desert animal only coming out at night.
Right, or like camouflage,
Camouflage, oh yeah, huge one.
to blend in.
Absolutely. All of these things are helping them survive.
So let's dive into some specifics then.
Let's do it.
Like, can you give us an example of maybe like a plant and an animal?
Sure.
And how they've adapted to a particular environment?
Yeah, so let's imagine like a windswept sand dune, right?
Okay.
A really harsh, unforgiving environment. But you have plants like murum grass that absolutely thrive there.
Wow.
How do they do it? Well, first of all, their roots go super deep,
Okay.
down into the sand to tap into those hidden freshwater sources.
So they're like reaching for a secret underground well.
They're going way down deep to get that water, but that's not all they have to deal with, constant wind and salty spray.
Right. That can't be easy on the leaves.
No, it's not easy at all. And that's where murum grass has these other cool tricks. Its leaves actually curl inwards,
Oh.
almost like creating a little protected microclimate inside.
Wow.
That helps to trap moisture and reduce water loss.
That's fascinating.
And then on top of that, there's stomata, which are those tiny pores on the leaves that plants use for gas exchange.
Right.
They're tucked away in these little grooves, further shielding them from the wind.
It's like murum grass has its own personal air conditioning system going on.
Exactly. Yeah, it's incredible how these plants have evolved to survive in such a harsh environment.
This makes me think if murum grass is adapted to like a dry, sandy habitat,
Yeah.
what kind of adaptations would we see in plants living in a completely opposite environment like a mangrove swamp?
Oh, mangrove swamps. Those are fascinating.
Yeah.
They present a whole different set of challenges. You've got waterlogged soils,
Right.
low oxygen and high salinity.
Yeah.
That's not an easy place to live for most plants, but mangroves have evolved some really remarkable solutions. One example is the red mangrove. It develops these prop roots that kind of act like stilts,
Okay.
anchoring it in the soft mud and allowing it to access oxygen from the air.
So they've literally found a way to breathe underwater.
Pretty much, right? They're getting that oxygen from above the water. And then how do they deal with the salt, right? Because that's a real problem for plants.
Right. Yeah. Salt can be really damaging.
Absolutely it can. And mangroves have a couple of tricks up their sleeve. Some of them have special filters in their roots to keep out the excess salt,
Oh, wow.
and others can actually excrete salt through their leaves.
It's like they have their own built-in desalination plant.
It is. It's amazing. And then on top of that, their seeds, which are called propagules,
Okay.
they can actually float in salt water for really long distances before taking root in a new location.
So they're like little adventurers.
They are, yeah. They're ready to colonize new areas.
That's so cool.
It is, yeah. Mangroves are incredible survivors.
They like if they've really figured out how to thrive in a tough spot.
They have.
But while we're on the topic of plants, I'm curious about plants that live entirely in water.
Oh, yeah.
Like the giant water
Oh,
lily.
giant water lily?
Those massive leaves are just incredible.
They are, yeah. How do those things stay afloat?
Yeah. How do they manage?
Well, those enormous leaves are all about maximizing sunlight capture in their aquatic environment.
Right.
They've got these upturned rims to prevent overcrowding from other plants. And then they also have these really cleverly placed drainage slits to prevent rainwater from accumulating and pulling them under.
It's like they've mastered the art of floating architecture.
It is. It's really cool.
So we've seen how individual plant species have adapted to specific environments.
Right.
But what are the big picture factors that determine where different species can live on a global scale?
That's a great question. And it leads us to this broader concept of abiotic factors and how they shape entire ecosystems.
Okay.
These factors, things like temperature, light availability, water availability, soil conditions, wind patterns,
Right.
they all play a huge role in determining which species can survive and thrive in a particular location.
Okay, so it's like a set of rules that govern the distribution of life on Earth.
That's a great way to think about it.
And can you give us some specific examples of how each of these factors plays out in the real world?
Sure, so let's start with temperature.
Okay.
It's pretty intuitive that you won't find polar bears basking in the tropics,
Well-
right? Their thick fur and blubber are specifically designed for those freezing Arctic conditions.
Yeah.
Whereas reptiles, on the other hand, they thrive in warmer climates
Right.
because they rely on external heat sources to regulate their body temperature.
It's a great point. Different creatures for different climates.
Absolutely. And each species has its own temperature comfort zone.
Yeah.
What about light? How does that factor in?
Yeah, light seems pretty important, especially for plants.
It's crucial for plants if you think about a dense forest.
Right.
You'll notice this distinct vertical layering of plant life.
Okay.
You've got the tall trees reaching for the canopy, soaking up the most sunlight, and then you've got these shade-tolerant species down below
Right.
that have adapted to survive with much less light.
It's like a whole world stacked on top of itself.
It is, yeah. It's amazing how even something as simple as light can create such diversity.
What about water?
Water is a game changer. It shapes entire ecosystems and drives the evolution of some incredible adaptations.
Right. I mean, we need water to survive.
Absolutely. Think about the contrast between a cactus that can store water for months
Yeah.
and a water lily that needs constant immersion. They have evolved in completely different worlds.
Totally.
And then there's soil composition factors like pH and nutrient content can be make or break for certain plants.
Oh, right. Some plants like it acidic, some like it basic.
Exactly. Some are specialists thriving only in very specific soil conditions.
It's incredible how specific these requirements can be.
It is. And then there's wind.
Wind.
Yeah.
That seems like more of a force of destruction than anything else.
It can be destructive, for sure.
Yeah.
But it also shapes adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
Plants in windy areas often have flexible stems and reduced leaf area to minimize wind resistance.
Okay, so they're like bending with the wind.
Exactly. And think about seed dispersal.
Right.
A lot of plants rely on wind to carry their seeds far and wide.
So even wind, which seems so chaotic, plays a role in the balance of nature.
Absolutely. It all ties together.
It's all interconnected, isn't it?
It is. And each species has this specific range of tolerance. For each of these abiotic factors,
Or each one.
for each one, and that range determines where they can survive and reproduce. Think of it like a comfort zone.
So it's like a set of boundaries for each species. Stay within those limits and you're good.
Exactly.
But what happens when an environmental factor falls outside of those boundaries?
That's when things get interesting. When an environmental factor goes beyond a species' range of tolerance, it becomes a limiting factor.
Okay, so it's like a deal breaker.
Pretty much one factor gets out of whack and the whole game changes.
And how do scientists actually study these limiting factors in the real world?
Well, one technique is called transect sampling.
Okay.
Imagine creating a line across an environmental gradient,
Okay.
like from a shoreline to further inland, and then by measuring how the abundance of different species changes along that line,
Right.
scientists can see how species distribution is affected by these abiotic variables.
So it's a way to visualize those invisible boundaries that shape where organisms can live.
Exactly, and it helps us understand those complex relationships between organisms and their environments.
This is all so fascinating.
It is, yeah.
But what about marine ecosystems? Are they influenced by abiotic factors in the same way?
Absolutely. Marine ecosystems are just as influenced by these abiotic factors.
Okay.
And a fantastic example is coral reefs.
Coral reefs, okay.
They're incredibly diverse, but also extremely sensitive to changes in their environment.
Yeah, I've heard that coral reefs are in serious trouble because of climate change. Is it because of these abiotic factors we've been talking about?
You're absolutely right to make that connection. Coral reefs depend on a very specific set of abiotic conditions.
Okay.
Light, for instance, is crucial for the symbiotic algae that live within corals and provide them with nutrients.
Right.
And then temperature is another big one.
Okay.
Corals have a very narrow optimal temperature range, which is why they're mostly found in tropical and subtropical waters.
So even a small change in temperature could throw things off balance.
Unfortunately, yes, even a small change can cause major problems. And then there's sedimentation. Corals need clear water. Excess sediment blocks light and interferes with their feeding.
Okay.
And then salinity or salt concentration, that's another key factor. Corals need a specific salinity level to thrive.
So these reefs are like finely tuned instruments, mess with the settings and the music stops.
That's a great analogy, and climate change is definitely messing with the settings.
Right?
Warmer water temperatures, ocean acidification, increased storm intensity.
Yeah.
All of these things are impacting that delicate balance that coral reefs need to survive.
This is really making me think about how interconnected everything is, from a tiny blade of marram grass on a sand dune to a vast coral reef teeming with life. It's all about adapting to the environment.
It is. It's all connected.
But I'm also realizing how fragile these balances can be.
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. These ecosystems are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And we need to understand them and protect them.
Okay, so we've talked about plants and animals adapting to specific environments like sand dunes and mangrove swamps. And we've touched on the broader abiotic factors that shape ecosystems on a global scale.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering, how did these ideas scale up to the level of biomes?
That's a great question, and that's where we're headed next.
Awesome. I'm excited to learn more.
Me too.
Okay, well, stay tuned because we'll be diving into the world of biomes in the next part of our deep dive.
We'll see you there.
Welcome back. So but before the break, we were talking about all those abiotic factors,
Right.
like temperature and water, and how they can really influence where different organisms can live.
Absolutely.
But I'm also thinking about, the living parts of an ecosystem, right? Like all those interactions between different species.
Yes,
Do those matter too?
they absolutely do. It's not just about surviving the physical environment. It's also about how you interact with all the other living things around you.
Right, so it's like a whole other layer of complexity.
It is, and this leads us to this fascinating concept of ecological niches.
Okay, ecological niches.
Yes.
I remember that term from class,
Okay.
but it always seemed a bit abstract to me.
Yeah. It can be a little bit tricky to wrap your head around.
Can you break it down for us?
Sure. So think of an ecological niche as an organism's job description in its community.
Okay.
So it includes not only its physical habitat, like where it lives,
Right.
but also what it eats when it's active and how it interacts with other species.
So it's like its unique role in the grand ecosystem play.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. One of the fundamental principles in ecology is this thing called the competitive exclusion principle.
Okay, the competitive exclusion principle.
Yeah, and it states that two species can't coexist indefinitely if they occupy the exact same niche.
So it's like trying to fit two pegs into the same hole.
Exactly, something's got to give.
Right.
So competition for resources will inevitably lead to one species outcompeting the other,
Right.
pushing it to extinction or forcing it to adapt and occupy a slightly different niche.
Wow, so it's like a constant struggle for survival.
It is, in a way, and this competition is one of the key drivers of biodiversity.
So it's like a force that pushes evolution forward.
Exactly. It forces species to specialize and carve out their own unique place in the ecosystem.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's all about finding your place in the world.
It is.
But how do scientists actually study these niches? It seems like a pretty complex concept to pin down.
Yeah, it definitely can be. So one way is to distinguish between a species' fundamental niche
Okay.
and its realized niche.
Okay, fundamental versus realized.
So the fundamental niche is like the ideal scenario. It's the full range of environmental conditions and resources a species could theoretically use if there were no competition.
Okay, so no competition. That's the key there.
Exactly. But in the real world, there's always competition.
Right.
So the realized niche is the actual more limited space and resources a species occupies, taking into account all those real-world constraints.
So the fundamental niche is like the dream job, and the realized niche is the job you actually end up with.
I like that analogy. That's a good one.
Competition really shapes those realized niches, doesn't it?
It does. It's a major player, but it's not the only type of interaction that matters.
Right, we've got predation, symbiosis, all those fun.
Exactly. Those all come into play as well.
Okay, so let's break those down a little bit.
Okay.
Predation seems pretty straightforward, to eat or be eaten.
Yeah, the classic predator-prey relationship.
But symbiosis, that one always seemed a bit more complicated to me.
Yeah, symbiosis can be tricky because it involves all sorts of different relationships.
Okay, like what?
Well, one example is mutualism.
Mutualism.
This is a win-win situation where both species benefit.
Okay, I like those.
Right, like bees pollinating flowers.
Oh yeah, that's a classic
The
example.
bees get nectar and the flowers get pollinated. Everyone's happy.
So it's like a mutually beneficial exchange.
Exactly. And then you have commensalism,
Commensalism.
where one species benefits and the other is neither harmed nor helped.
Okay, so one gets a free ride, basically.
Pretty much like the remora fish that hitches a ride on sharks.
Oh yeah, those little guys.
They get to feed on scraps of food and get free transportation.
Not a bad deal.
Not bad at all. And then, of course, you have those relationships where one species benefits at the expense of another.
Right, the parasites.
Like parasites.
Like ticks on a dog.
Exactly. The parasite benefits and the host is harmed.
So it's a bit of a one-sided relationship.
It is, but even those relationships play a role in shaping ecosystems.
I'm starting to see how all these interactions, from competition to predation to symbiosis, can really influence where species live and how they behave.
They do. It's like this complex web of relationships that governs everything.
It's like a delicate balance, isn't it?
It is, and it's all interconnected, and we can't forget about the crucial roles of those organisms that break down dead matter.
Oh, right, the decomposers.
Exactly. We're talking about detritivores like earthworms and saprotrophs like fungi and bacteria.
So they're like the cleanup crew of the ecosystem.
Pretty much they break down dead plants and animals, releasing nutrients back into the system.
So it's like a recycling system that keeps everything running smoothly.
Exactly. Without them, nutrients would get locked up in dead matter, and the ecosystem would eventually grind to a halt.
So they're like the unsung heroes of the natural world.
They're essential for life as we know it.
And if we connect this back to our focus on adaptations,
Yes.
we can see that these ecological relationships are just as important as those abiotic factors in shaping the distribution and adaptations of species.
Absolutely. It's not just about adapting to the physical environment.
Right.
It's about adapting to the living environment as well.
It's like a whole other set of challenges.
It is, and it leads to some really fascinating adaptations.
Now, I'm curious about how nutritional strategies themselves play into this.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point.
You know, like, are you an autotroph, heterotroph?
Exactly. We can broadly categorize organisms based on how they obtain their energy.
Right, so plants are autotrophs because they make their own food through photosynthesis.
Exactly. They're the producers of the ecosystem.
And then animals are heterotrophs because they have to eat other organisms.
Right, they're the consumer.
And within the heterotrophs, we have different types of consumers, right?
We do. We've got the herbivores that eat plants,
Right.
the carnivores that eat meat, and the omnivores that eat both.
So it's like a giant food chain.
It is. And each link in that chain has its own unique set of adaptations.
Can you go to some examples?
Sure. So think about herbivores. They often have specialized teeth for grinding up tough plant matter.
Right, like cows.
Exactly. Cows, horses, all those grazing animals.
Yeah.
And their digestive systems are also adapted to break down cellulose, which is the main component of plant cell walls.
Wow, so their whole bodies are designed to process plants.
They are, whereas carnivores, on the other hand,
Yeah.
they've got sharp teeth and claws for catching and tearing prey.
They were built for hunting.
Exactly. And then you have all sorts of adaptations related to avoiding predation.
Oh, right, like camouflage we talked about earlier.
Camouflage, for sure.
Or maybe like poison dart frogs with their bright warning colors.
Exactly. Those bright colors are a signal to predators to stay away.
So it's like an evolutionary arms race.
It is predators and prey are constantly evolving in response to each other.
And plants have their own defenses too, right?
Oh, yeah, they do. They can develop thorn spines or even toxic compounds to deter herbivores.
So it's all connected.
Hmm.
The adaptations of one species can directly influence the adaptations of another.
Absolutely. And a specific application example given in your IB biology syllabus is the symbiotic relationship between zooxanthellae and coral reefs.
Oh, yeah. I remember learning about that.
So the zooxanthellae are these tiny algae that live inside the coral polyps.
Right.
And this is a prime example of mutualism.
Okay, win-win.
Exactly. The zooxanthellae provide the corals with essential nutrients through photosynthesis.
So they're like little food factories.
Pretty much. And they also give the corals their vibrant colors
Right.
and help them build their calcium carbonate skeletons.
And in return, the corals provide a safe and stable environment for the algae.
Exactly. It's a beautiful partnership.
But you mentioned earlier that coral reefs are in danger.
Yes, unfortunately, they are facing numerous threats.
How does that tie into this symbiotic relationship?
Well, when corals are stressed, often due to rising water temperatures or pollution, they expel their zooxanthellae.
So they kick out their little helpers.
In a way, yes, and this leads to coral bleaching.
Right, because the corals lose their color without the algae.
Exactly. And more importantly, they lose their major source of food.
So it's like the foundation of the entire ecosystem is crumbling.
You could say that without the zooxanthellae, the corals become much more susceptible to disease.
Wow, it's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is and how delicate these balances can be.
Is one disruption can have far-reaching consequences.
So we've gone from the microscopic world of those symbiotic algae to these vast coral reef ecosystems.
Right.
And I'm realizing that these interactions between species are just as important as those abiotic factors.
They are. They both play a huge role in shaping life on Earth.
This deep dive is really opening my eyes to the complexity of the natural world.
It is a fascinating and complex subject.
Okay, so we've talked about individual species and their adaptations.
Yes.
And we've explored those complex ecological relationships.
Right.
Now I'm ready to zoom out and look at the big picture.
Okay.
Let's talk about biomes, those large-scale ecological communities that span entire continents.
Let's do it.
I'm ready to explore the world.
All right, let's take a journey through the world's major biomes and see what wonders we can uncover.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive into the world of biomes.
Yes, let's explore those large-scale ecosystems.
Okay, so where are we headed first on our biome adventure?
Let's start with a classic, the tropical rainforest.
Ooh, the rainforest, always a good one.
It's teeming with life, incredible biodiversity.
I know they're known for being super lush and green,
Yeah.
so I'm guessing rainfall is a big factor.
You got it. Tropical rainforests are all about high rainfall and warm temperatures year-round.
Right, so it's like a constant summer there.
Pretty much. And those conditions create the perfect environment for plants to just explode with growth.
Which explains why there's so much diversity.
Exactly. You've got these towering trees forming multiple layers of vegetation.
Wow.
From the emergent layer that pokes through the canopy to the forest floor.
So it's like a whole world stacked on top of itself.
It really is. Each layer supports its own unique set of plants and animals, all interconnected.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've got the rainforest. What's next on our biome tour?
Let's shift gears and head to a temperate forest.
Okay, temperate forests.
Yeah, so instead of constant warmth and rain, temperate forests have distinct seasons.
Right, so we're talking warm summers, cool winters.
Exactly, and moderate rainfall throughout the year.
So like the forests we see in a lot of North America and Europe.
That's right. Those are classic temperate forests.
And those are the ones that have those amazing fall colors.
Absolutely. Those vibrant autumn colors are a signature of temperate forests.
It's like nature's grand finale before winter.
It is, and those colors are actually a sign that the trees are preparing for winter by shedding their leaves.
Oh, so it's not just for show.
Not at all. It's a clever adaptation, and that annual leaf fall creates this nutrient-rich layer on the forest floor,
Okay.
which supports a whole ecosystem of decomposers.
Right, breaking down all those leaves.
Exactly, and providing essential nutrients for new growth in the spring.
It's like a cycle of renewal.
It is.
Okay, so from the lush rainforests to the colorful temperate forests. I'm loving this biome tour.
Me too. It's amazing to see the diversity of life on Earth.
All right, so where are we off to next?
Let's head north to a more extreme environment, the taiga, also known as the boreal forest.
Okay, I'm picturing lots of snow.
You got it. The taiga is a land of long, cold winters and short, cool summers.
So pretty much the opposite of a rainforest.
Exactly. It's a challenging environment for life.
Yeah, bet.
Low temperatures, frozen ground, and not a lot of rainfall.
So what kind of plants can even survive there?
Well, if you're thinking towering trees with big, broad leaves, you're in for a surprise.
Okay.
The dominant trees in the taiga are conifers.
Conifers, so like pine trees and firs?
Exactly. Those needle-like leaves are specially adapted to conserve water and withstand the weight of snow.
Oh, that makes sense.
And their conical shape helps to shed snow easily.
So it's like they're built for winter.
They've evolved to thrive in those harsh conditions.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm starting to see how each biome has its own unique set of challenges and adaptations.
It's all about finding ways to survive and thrive in whatever environment you're in.
Okay, so we've explored the forest. Now let's head to a completely different type of biome, grasslands.
Our grasslands, let's go. I'm picturing wide open spaces, endless skies.
Yeah, maybe a herd of bison roaming around.
Exactly. Grasslands are defined by the dominance of grasses rather than trees.
Right, so less shade, more sun.
Exactly. They typically have moderate rainfall, but distinct wet and dry seasons and temperatures can vary quite a bit depending on where you are.
Okay.
And those factors combined with periodic fires create conditions that favor grasses over trees.
Right, I remember learning that fires can actually be beneficial for grasslands.
They help to control tree growth and renew the soil.
So it's like a natural reset button.
Exactly. And these grasslands support some of the most iconic animal communities on Earth, from the vast herds of grazing animals in the African savanna to the prairie dogs and pronghorn of the North American prairies.
Wow, this biome tour is really making me appreciate the diversity of life on our planet.
Me too. It's incredible to see how life has adapted to so many different environments.
Okay, so we've got rainforests, temperate forests, taiga grasslands. What's left?
Let's journey to the coldest biome of them all, the tundra.
Ooh, the tundra. That sounds intense.
It's a land of extremes, extremely low temperatures, permanently frozen ground, and very little precipitation.
Permanently frozen ground. Wow.
Yeah, it's called permafrost, and it makes it a very challenging environment for life.
So how can anything survive there?
Well, trees are scarce in the tundra, but you do find low-growing plants like mosses, lichens, and dwarf shrubs.
Okay, so they've adapted to the cold and the lack of soil.
Exactly, and you won't find many reptiles or amphibians, but there are some remarkable animals that call the tundra home.
Like what?
Arctic foxes, reindeer, musk, oxen, polar bears.
Wow, those are some hardy creatures.
They've all evolved special adaptations to survive the extreme cold and the limited resources.
This has been an incredible journey from the lush rainforests to the frozen tundra. We've seen how life has adapted to so many different environments.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexity and the beauty of the natural world.
I'm glad to hear that, and remember, there's still so much more to explore.
That's true. The world is full of fascinating adaptations just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure exploring with you today. Until next time, stay curious, everyone.